Good evening. I'm going to go ahead and open tonight's Kalispell City Council meeting, December 4th, 2023. Can I get a roll call?
Councillor Nunnally?
Aye.
Councillor Carlson?
Here.
Councillor Gabrielle?
Here.
Councillor Dowd?
Here.
Councillor Dahlman?
Here.
Councillor Fisher?
Here.
Councillor Hunter?
Here.
Mayor Johnson? And Council President Graham.
Here. Going to move into, pledge. I'm going to move into a pledge of allegiance. Mr. Hunley, would you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Move into tonight's agenda approval. Is there a motion for approval?
Second.
Seconded by
Jed.
Mr. Fisher. All in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign? Not opposed. I'm going to move into our consent agenda this evening. There are two items on tonight's agenda. The first one is the council minutes for November 20th, 2023. And the second is confirmation of Officer Michael Frame. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the agenda as published, or the consent agenda as published.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Gabriel. All in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? Seeing none. At this time, I want to invite Police Chief Jordan Venizio to come forward and say a few words.
Thank you, Council President Graham and Council. I'm before you tonight for confirmation of Police Officer Michael Frame. Michael here, he came to us from the Missoula County Detention Center over in Missoula, where he worked in the jail there. He's just completing his 1-year probation with us. He's completed the police academy as well as our field training program here at KPD. He has quiet confidence. He's a man of very few words, which I'm guessing you're about to see shortly. I asked Michael for permission to tell a little bit of a story of when he got hired. So Michael applied with us on a few different occasions. And unlike many people who do that, every time Michael came back better. And he sought feedback, and he reached out to see what he can do better. He told us that we are the only agency that he's going to keep applying to, and basically informed us that the day will come where we call him and give him the job. and he wouldn't quit. And that has been the type of employee he's been since coming here. We're very proud to have Michael with us. He's a great asset, and I think you guys will see the same thing. So we have his new badge, and he can get rid of the probationary one. Council President, did you want to pin that on?
Sure.
I even prepped it for you, so you don't have to struggle with the
I
back.
appreciate
The
that.
back.
Because this is going to be bad.
No.
You have the privilege of being the first badge that I've pinned on.
I'll do this way.
Here's his new one.
Take this off first. Congratulations, and thank you for stepping up to serve our community. And I'd like to, on behalf of the mayor and the rest of the council and myself, one of the things that Mayor Johnson likes to tell our new officers is your first job is to return home after your shift to your family and to stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah.
So this is the part I've been dreading, is giving a speech to a bunch of people in front of me. I'm maybe a police officer, but I'm still afraid of public speaking sometimes. So, like Chief said, I'm a man of very few words, so I'll make it pretty quick so we all get out of here sooner. I just wanted to start by thanking everybody that was able to make it out tonight. Does mean a lot to me to see all the people out here to support me. Just pretty proud of what I do, where I work. I work for a great department with a great group of ladies and gentlemen, and it's like a family. And that's probably my favorite part about it. One sec. Thoughts are coming. Okay. None of my family is able to make it out tonight because everybody lives out of town and weather is too bad and girlfriend works. So they won't get to hear this part, but they know that I'm very thankful for them staying by my side the entire time. Not many people know this, but starting off as a police officer, it's very stressful. The training is overwhelming, and there's a lot of nights where I would stay awake at night wondering if this is what I wanted to do. And my family was always there to support me and get me through it. And here I am now, and I'm glad I stuck with it, because this is probably the best job I've ever had. That's all I have to say.
Okay, moving on. I'm gonna move into, well, there's no committee reports tonight to be done, so I'm gonna move into public comment, and this would be the part of our meeting where those in the audience, if they have public comment on anything not currently on tonight's agenda, now would be the time to step to the podium and state your name and your address. Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna close tonight's public comment and move into tonight's reports, recommendations, and subsequent actions, council action. And there are 6 items tonight. The first is Dusty Acres annexation and zoning. The second is the Stillwater Bend Phase 2 planned unit development and preliminary plat. The third is Lofts at Buffalo Hill conditional use permit. The fourth is Westview Estates Phases 6 final plat and subdivision improvement agreement and cash in lieu of parkland for phases 6 and 7. The fifth one is Westview Estates Phase 7 final plat. And the sixth one is appointment to the Architectural Review Committee. And Mr. Russell will jump into the first one, Dusty Acres annexation and zoning.
Yeah, and to deliver the staff report, I'll turn it over to PJ Sorensen, our senior planner.
All right, thank you, Council. Just as a side note, there are 2 actions we're looking at here. There's the resolution on annexation and the first reading of the initial zoning. We'll be doing the staff report on both of those. Dusty Acres LLC has applied for annexation and initial zoning of R4 for approximately 51.8 acres of land. The area to be annexed includes property generally on the west side of Highway 93 North to the south of Hagerman Lane, right there, and adjacent to the city limits on the south and west sides of the property, which is the boundary of the future phases of Stillwater Village. The annexation also includes property on the east side of Highway 93 North, generally between Hagerman Lane and to approximately 200 feet north of Ponderosa Lane. We are only looking at the annexation and zoning. We're not reviewing any subdivision or other development proposals at this time, and they'll be coming forward with that at some date in the future. You can see the surrounding properties and the zoning. It's a little bit mixed. There's R2 PUD, which is Silverbrook. You've got R3 Quail Meadows, the R4, which is Stillwater Village, which we just approved earlier this year. We've got R3 PUD, which is Eagle Valley Ranch, and also some RA2 PUD in that area as well. And the growth policy designates it as suburban residential, which supports the requested R4 zone. The property is located within the annexation boundary, which is part of the growth policy and was established based in part on the ability to efficiently serve the property. Once annexed to the city, full city services would be made available to the property owner. Any necessary infrastructure associated with the development would be required to be constructed by the developer in accordance with the City of Kalispell's design and construction standards and any other development standards that may apply. and that's a shot of the property looking to the east. 2 public comments were received at the public hearing in addition to those from the applicant. The comments primarily related to future development of the property, traffic, lighting, groundwater, nearby farm, and bike path safety. With that, the Kalispell City Planning Board and Zoning Commission adopted staff report KA 2307 as findings of fact and recommended that the Kalispell City Council annex the property and that the zoning be City R4 residential. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
There's 2 parts to this, right?
Yeah, so there's gonna be the resolution and the ordinance.
Correct.
Questions for all of it?
I don't have any questions, but just that.
Okay, all right. Okay, at this point, I'll open it up for public comment. Any public comment wishing to speak, please step to the mic and state your name and your address. Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna close public comment and look to the council for a motion on the resolution. Ms. Gabriel?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move resolution number 6174, a resolution to provide for the alteration of the boundaries of the city of Kalispell by including therein as an annexation certain real property generally described as being located on the west side of Highway 93 North to the south of Hagerman Lane and adjacent to the city limits on the south and west sides of the property, including but not limited to property addressed as 170, 180, 190, and 200 Hagerman Lane, and also including property on the east side of Highway 93 North, generally between Hagerman Lane to the approximately 200 feet north of Ponderosa Lane, including but not limited to property addressed as 3327 Highway 93 North, and as further described on Exhibit A to be known as Dusty Acres Edition number 468, to zone said property in accordance with the Kalispell zoning ordinance and to declare an effective date.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Nunley. Any discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, can I get a roll call vote?
Counselor Nunley,
Aye.
Counselor Carlson,
Aye.
Counselor Gabrielle,
Aye.
Counselor Dowd,
Aye.
Counselor Dahlman,
Aye.
Counselor Fisher,
Aye.
Counselor Hunter,
Aye.
Council President Graham.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. I'm gonna move into the ordinance. Can I get a motion for ordinance 1916? Ms. Gabriel?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move ordinance number 1916, an ordinance to amend section 27.02.010, official zoning map, City of Kalispell zoning ordinance, ordinance number 1677, by zoning certain real property, more particularly described as being located on the west side of Highway 93 North to the south of Hagerman Lane and adjacent to the city limits on the south and west sides of the property, including but not limited to property addressed as 170, 180, 190, and 200 Hagerman Lane, and also including property on the east side of Highway 93 North, generally between Hagerman Lane to approximately 200 feet north of Ponderosa Lane, including but not limited to property addressed as 3327 Highway 93 North, and as further described on Exhibit A, previously zoned County SAG 10, Suburban Agricultural, B2, HO, General Business Highway Overlay, and B3, HO, Community Business Highway Overlay, to City R4 Residential, in accordance with the Kalispell Growth Policy Plan at 2035, and to provide an effective date.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Fisher. Any discussion? Mr. Hunter?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. We'll be supporting this. I always have a little bit of heartburn when we're going up towards Silverbrook with more development. It seems awfully far away, but it is within our growth boundary, and So I support the annexation. I'll be supporting this zoning. I appreciate it's R4, a little bit higher, our highest residential zoning. And I know we don't have a plat yet. We'll be seeing that at a future date. Just expressing my concern. I've expressed this at recent meeting previously about sprawl in our community, and I hope that when we do see the plat coming forward, we see a mix of housing types and higher densities to try to reduce sprawl in our community. So just want to express that hope for the future of this project.
Any other comments? Can't get a roll call?
Counselor Nunley,
Aye.
Counselor Carlson,
Aye.
Counselor Gabrielle,
Aye.
Counselor Dowd,
Aye.
Counselor Dahlman,
Aye.
Counselor Fisher,
Aye.
Counselor Hunter,
Aye.
Council President Graham.
Aye. Motion carries. Gonna move into tonight's second item, Stillwater Bend Phase 2. Mr. Russell?
Mayor and council, again, I'll turn it over to PJ Sorensen, our senior planner, to deliver the staff report.
All right, thank you, Mayor, Council. It's similar to the last one we do in the staff report for both the PUD reading and the preliminary plat. Stillwater Bend Phase 2 includes applications for a PUD overlay and major preliminary plat on approximately 30.5 acres of land. The property was annexed in 2017 as part of a 56-acre placeholder PUD with 25.5 acres along Highway 93, Zone B2, which is general business, and the remainder zoned RA2, which is residential apartment office. In 2020, the B2 area received a full PUD approval, with the RA2 remaining as a placeholder PUD. This PUD proposal would encompass the remaining area. The proposed PUD would allow for 432 multifamily dwelling units, and the preliminary plat includes 4 lots, roads, and the common area. Where we're looking at as far as the location is just right off of Highway 93 North, straight across from Rose Crossing, which would extend through the development and actually have a roadway reserved for potential bridge across the river at some point in the future. As I mentioned, this first half was already developed. You don't see the utilities just because the mapping hadn't caught up, but those were recently installed and accepted by the city within the last few months. Then with this western portion being what's the subject tonight. Rose Crossing, as I mentioned, would extend as a minor arterial through to that future bridge. Traffic impact study is required for the development, and they did submit a TIS from 2019. The TIS included both Stillwater Bend Phases 1 and 2, and an addendum to the TIS was completed in 2023, showing that the conclusions of the earlier study remained valid, particularly because the earlier study was based on a much larger projected number of residential units. Under city standards, the developer shall maintain or improve the level of service at any of the impacted intersections, and the TIS shows that no additional mitigation measures are necessary to meet that standard. I guess a few other notes as far as the extension of the water and sewer. In terms of the sewer, it does include service with the private lift station, as well as an analysis of downstream lift stations, and the developer would be responsible for any necessary upgrades. Just a shot of the property. Property is zoned RA2 with a placeholder PUD. The property is designated as urban mixed use in the growth policy, which is consistent with the existing zoning. The growth policy encourages a variety of residential development that provides housing for all sectors and income levels within the community. Under the growth policy, up to 40 units per acre are allowed. The proposed density for the project is calculated for developable land only. So in this instance, the 23 1/3 acres of developable land would generate 18.5 units per acre. This is showing the general layout. Again, Rose Crossing would come through here. You'd bisect the two properties. You'd have the apartment buildings kind of forming these L shapes coming around the parking areas. This would be an area where they would have the clubhouse, swimming pool, and recreational amenities. There'd also be a number of trails that would run around the outside of the property. These roads that extend up would be private, the loop roads. The only public street would be the Rose Crossing extension that would be coming through. Stormwater design would be reviewed by Public Works. I would note the spot right here is part of the stormwater retention area. And they would be designing that to be a feature, I guess, rather than a utilitarian aspect of it. Would include an activity path that would be going around that pond. Under the subdivision regulations and fire code, a second access in addition to Rose Crossing must be provided once there are 100 or more units. Eventually, as I mentioned, it's anticipated that Rose Crossing would continue across the river, while the extension of the road would provide the second access in the long term. A separate second access is necessary in the short term. The plans show that the second access is part of the initial phase of Stillwater Bend Phase 2. The access would run through these lots here. There's already an existing access easement as part of Phase 1, and that second access road could be placed in that location. Details of the design would need to be submitted to the city for review and approval by both Public Works and the Fire Department. Second access is a critical component of the overall design and should be a condition of approval. And without that second access, the number of units would be capped at 100 until such time as Rose Crossing would be extended. This is a 3D image of what we were just looking at with that layout. And some of the perspectives of the clubhouse, as well as running down Rose Crossing. They did request 2 zoning deviations and 2 subdivision deviations. For zoning, there was a setback request to drop from 15 feet to 10. The reduced setback is requested to help accommodate site constraints relative to slopes, the river, and the 80-foot minor arterial right-of-way that bisects the property. The reduced setback to 10 feet doesn't interfere with the street or utility easements and allows for the urban appearance desired by the applicant. In this situation, the deviation request is appropriate. Second one is building height. The RA2 zone has a maximum height of 45 feet, and the requested deviation would be a maximum height of up to 60 feet for the buildings shown in the western portion through there of the development. The request is primarily to accommodate the natural grades of the site and to provide the option for tuck-under parking on those buildings. Additionally, the height deviation would allow a continuation of the varying roof lines shown in the proposed elevations. Building heights through the remainder of the development will be approximately 42 feet, and it would be appropriate to allow this deviation as well. The 2 deviations from subdivision regulations related to the setbacks from the river and access to adjacent properties. In regard to setbacks from the river, the subdivision regulations require a minimum 200-foot setback for impaired streams, including the Stillwater River. The setback is measured from the ordinary high water mark. The setback can be reduced per the terms of the ordinance based on sound scientific information and reasonable mitigation to address potential impacts. In the case of bank stabilization, a geotech report shall be required. There were detailed findings relating to this aspect of the approval of Phase 1 of the development, which should be reaffirmed in the Phase 2 findings and are outlined in the staff report. While there are riparian scrub shrub areas along the riverbank, there were no identified wetlands adjacent to the property and only the river setback would apply. While Phase 1 is a separate PUD, the request is essentially for a continuation of the previously approved deviation that applied to the first half of the site due to similar site conditions and based on a 2017 geotech study of the full site conducted by Slopeside Engineering. The conditions of approval for Phase 1 included A, allowing a reduction in the Stillwater River setback from 200 feet to the setback line determined by the geotech report, provided that the setback could not be less than 100 feet. B was requiring the 100-foot Stillwater River setback be restored with native riparian habitat. A landscape plan would be submitted by a specialist with experience in riparian area restoration. And C, providing that as part of the engineering review process, the City of Kalispell would have the option to submit the geotech analysis to a third party. This is showing the 2017 geotech as well as the current conditions. As part of the application for Phase 2, the prior geotech report was reviewed by Slopeside Engineering and determined to still provide valid information. The applicant provided additional exhibits that add further detail to the Phase 2 area relative to the proposed construction. The exhibit here shows the recommended geotech setback in red, the 100-foot setback line in blue, and the 200-foot setback line in orange. This exhibit shows areas where the development would encroach into the 200-foot area. It should be noted that trails, stormwater facilities, parks, and similar improvements are allowed in the setback under the subdivision regulations. So mainly you'd be seeing these areas in kind of that purplish blue coming around in those 3 locations. And this exhibit shows the cultivated area within the 200-foot setback, which has occurred as close as 40 to 50 feet from the river and has contributed over time to its impaired status. The restoration plan required as a condition of approval would improve the current situation as it relates to the health of the riverbank due to the cultivation activities. Additional information specific to the area of the development is still warranted to verify details related to the riverbank and slopes through the phase, and any updates to the geotech report required by Public Works should be submitted and subject to their review. Based on the additional information, adjustments to the site design, and a potential reduction in the number of units may result based on those updates in the reports. Subject to the foregoing, it is appropriate to apply the Phase 1 conditions relative to the watercourse setback to Phase 2, and the deviation request is appropriate. Lastly, there was the block length and connectivity. Generally, future street extensions to adjacent properties should be laid out at regular block lengths of no more than 600 feet. In this particular case, with the river extending through, they have the one connection with the bridge. Probably not reasonable to have additional ones and could impair the river more than you'd want in any case. There is, however, a potential connection up to the north. You've got the golf course in this area, but there is a home about 5 acres or so up in this area, and provisions for a potential future connection into any development that might happen there should be provided for as well. Subject to that, this deviation would also be appropriate. This is just showing the plat and the phasing, with Phase 1 starting on the eastern end, moving to Phase 2, 3, and 4. Phase 1 would include that second connection, as well as the stormwater area on the western tip of the property. No public comments were received at the public hearing other than those from the applicant, and the Kalispell City Planning Board and Zoning Commission did adopt staff report KPUD 2303 and KPP 2309 as findings of fact, and recommended that the Kalispell City Council approve the plan unit development and preliminary plat for Stillwater Bend Phase 2, subject to 35 listed conditions. There were some slides that the architect and engineer for the project had to go through. If you would like to look at those either in the public portion or now.
We do it in the public portion of it.
Okay.
I think it's a really good presentation to put out there because it shows where the vision came from. We had done it one time before on one of their other projects too, and I think it's nice to have. So, are you guys good with that? Okay.
Okay. So with that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those too.
Any questions? Ms. Dahlman?
Thank you, President. I mean, you probably don't know this, but when possibly would Rose Crossing cross that river?
I guess it's a little bit speculative at this point. Nobody's been in to talk to us about that. You've got the gravel pit over there that, whenever they try to remediate that, you would probably see something extend through at that point. So it's probably quite a ways down the road would be the best guess.
Okay.
That would be a public project though, right? Not a privately funded effort.
In some ways, it's hard to speculate because you don't know what the plans would be there in the future. If it's necessary to develop that other property, that's typically something that you look at the developer to do. If we look at it as, a major thoroughfare from West Valley over to Highway 2 or something like that, then, down the road, it might be a public one. But at this point, it's just too early to say one way or the other.
Any other questions?
It's a similar situation like at Grandview and 4 Mile. The right-of-way's there. We're planning for it, so at such time, whether it's a developer-driven or a public project, at least the right-of-way's there so that could happen, as traffic moves and the valley grows.
Mr. Nunley?
I guess that would just draw me to the next question, since across the river is county property, currently in the county. Their planning on that side is to also have potential of a bridge?
Whether it's something develops in the city or county, you still have, access needs that come through, especially if you're looking at fire and so forth. And, again, there's nobody's talking about any type of development
Sure.
at this point, whether it's with us or with the county on that. But yeah, whether it developed in the city or county, you probably need some type of an access across there.
Okay. I would just hate to plan for a bridge to nowhere and it built up and developed
Well,
in a
part of
different
it's just a
way.
roadway reserve, as you can kind of see in there. So, there's the reservation there, but they're not doing any work with the bridge or ending the bridge there. So if for some reason that never went through, that road would just end there with the appropriate turnaround and not extend.
Okay, thank you.
That is something, I guess, the county does make us aware of projects, whether or not that ended up, if we're look far enough out and that's why you're planning for extensions, that likely would develop in the city, but even if it developed in the county, we would be providing comments. And the county was also part of the city transportation plan, so within our growth boundary, they should be following that as well, and we would be providing those comments at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Stallman?
Thank you. Well, considering all that's just been said, I mean, wouldn't that like drastically change the development if they built a bridge there? I mean, wouldn't that encroach on part of the development?
Well, not entirely. It's as Jared mentioned, it's part of the transportation plan. It's called out as a minor arterial that would come through there. When you look at the overall plan, this is tied into, at this point, their access is primarily off of the highway with the new traffic signal that's out at Rose Crossing. It's coming through because it's a mixed-use development overall. It's coming through their commercial area with different projects that are looked at in there. And it would run through there. One of the things that the city has had a policy on and really actually has regulations on too is to discourage developments from just looking at them to themselves. We look at interconnectivity, running streets and connecting into adjoining developments. And so this is right in line with that's the city's approach to that type of a situation.
It just seems like to put a development there and then the possibility of a bridge, like I would think that the bridge would come before, I don't know. It just seems like that the bridge is kind of a big deal, crossing that river there, and then they build this development. I just don't know how that's not going to negatively impact that neighborhood when that happens. I'm kind of just talking off the top of my brain right now.
As PJ had mentioned, it's really looking out into the future. And
Yeah.
what's worse is if you don't plan for that, and then you shut off any potential connectivity later on. So right now, it's just, as Mr. Sorensen said, similar to any other development we do, it's forward-looking to have that. Where would it go if there's a development that necessitates that bridge later on? That's where it would be. Versus if you don't plan for it, you cut that opportunity off and never have that option.
I get that, and I guess where I'm coming from is like the bridge over that river, regardless of all of the geotechnical reports and all of that, it is still going to be a stressor on that body of water, in my opinion. And so taking that into account now helps form my decision about this now.
Well, that is our transportation plan to cross that river. So that's what's planned for, and the right of way is planned for that 80-foot wide. So we plan for it as a minor arterial. It's got limited access approaches. You've got no direct driveway approaches on and off of it. So we're using that plan to plan for that, for the 80-foot right of way. And, as part of the adopted transportation plan, it did show a crossing across that. So that's why it's there. We're not doing it because we want to. It's just because we're doing it as part of the planning exercise.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing no questions, I'm going to open this item up for public comment.
Will McDonald, I live at 180 Fauna Road, and I represent the ownership group. And we did work with the city over the last, I think, 6-8 months in putting together this plan. We went through a number of iterations, speaking specifically to the bridge, we did look at the master growth policy with the traffic plan, and we did sit down with the neighbor, Jeff Crouch, and that was something that honestly, we listened to his input too, because his property, as you can see from the gravel pits there, it's just how do we tie together to the traffic? And we did work with Public Works, get their comments. So, you know, it's part of the master plan or the traffic plan. We're not opposed to it. We did spend a lot of time, WGM did, from a preliminary analysis, just from looking at where the soils were for a good crossing, where we located it, sitting down with both Jared and PJ, it did make sense. So we're not necessarily opposed to it at all. And we actually worked with it with our team, Cushing Terrell and WGM. David Kuhl will give a presentation here just on where we came from with the theory. But again, we put a lot of thought into it. We had the Stillwater Bend River going through it. We wanted to take advantage of that while also looking at the road system and providing safe emergency services around the buildings. So again, a lot of planning went into this. So at this time, I'll turn it over to David. And then if you guys have any questions, I'm here.
Hello, Council. I'm David Kuhl. I'm an architect with Cushing Terrell, and yeah, I'll do my best to whip through this pretty quickly. As architects, you know, we like to come up with theories and all kinds of fun ideas to explain the reasons why we do what we do. So I'm going to walk through that pretty quickly. This is a pretty awesome piece of property when you look at it. Kind of floats out there next to the river. It's rare that we get a piece of property like this that has this much access to riverfront and actually great views in every direction, and very likely will stay that way for a long, long time. So what you're going to see is how we came across the layout that we did. The other thing that I should mention is we like to look at the site and even beyond the site for influence on how the project is designed. So this is just a snapshot of the site. The next one, I think, and by the way, my good friend PJ over there is going to be rapid fire on the. In fact, if I start talking too fast, just keep hitting the advance button. That helps a lot. This is just a blown out view. What for fun, we kind of backed up and said, where does the Stillwater River even start? So traced it all the way back, and it looks like it starts in the headwaters, right just about at the Canadian border. Followed it all the way down through the Stillwater Lakes and all the way down, and of course ends up tying in to the Flathead and so forth. But just some ways to kind of look at where the expanse of it really is. When you go to the next one, so what does it mean when you talk about the different zones of a river? This is, again, the research portion of how we do what we do. There's zone 1 of the headwaters where it starts in the mountains and it drains from snow, works its way into transfer zone number 2. We're in zone 3, and you can tell because the river does a lot of this and it starts to wait before it gets down kind of into the flatlands before it gets to the other waterways. But we noticed some interesting little curves and things. You see that there. The next slide shows what those are. Those are oxbows. We probably know what those are. A lot of people are hunting ducks and things at oxbows. There's a few around our site. There's even one basically on it you can see there. And we started thinking architecturally, I know it seems a little odd, but how can those shapes actually help us shape to some degree what the buildings might look like? The next slide shows some little, oh, I'm sorry, we'll get there. This is actually not only oxbows, but how they're formed. Just in case you're wondering, during flood periods, the water speeds up and it starts to deposit and leave these areas as little curve formed areas that it severs off because of the speed of the water, and it builds up the sediment and shuts them off. It's kind of interesting. And the next slide actually shows how when the river actually naturally it speeds up as it wraps those outer curves, and it's actually erodes and creates those cut banks, if you will. We thought maybe there's something we could learn from banks as well as we think about the architecture. So the next slide, I think, just goes back into, so yeah, we got some cut banks as well. Areas where, in fact, Geotech even said some of these areas you got to stay away from because naturally this is where the river is going to continue to carve away. We just got to be careful of that. But what can we learn about bluffs and things? The next slide shows some images of bluffs. These are just images of bluffs and riverbanks generally in Montana. Lots of color, lots of exposed stone and texture. The next one is another one. And again, looking at sediment, layers of sediment, breaks in the stone, and other colors and materials. So we'll show you what that means to architecture later. The next slide is just another one, and you can just, again, get a sense of how over time these rivers are slowly carving away constantly at the earth around them. The next slide is, we also just look for fun at some research of how other people are dealing with riverfront properties. You can go to the next one, and I think even the next one. This is just, we haven't quite got to the design here yet, but just know we really want to focus. We have a lot of land that's right on the water. We actually can't develop, so we're just going to develop it into fun green spaces as time goes on here. So it's going to be actually really exciting to do that. The next slide just goes back to the base, and then you flip ahead and it starts to show some squiggles, and the purple lines we're starting to show curves and things and thinking what can we do on our site that we can utilize that form, that sort of external form. You can see almost the form of an oxbow. It actually kind of creates this panoramic look, if you will. It pretty much represents a panorama, and it also encloses a space inside it. We started to think, how can you use that? Flip to the next one and sort of work it way into geometries as opposed to curves, because as we'll know, curves forms are much more expensive than square forms. So we didn't want to do a bunch of curves as much as the architect wanted to. The owner didn't want us to do that. So we started looking at other forms that are actually, constructible, if you will, and how do we actually push those forms right to the edge? And so what you're seeing here essentially is a ring of architecture facing the waterfront, the mountains beyond, and then even up to the north and northeast to Glacier and Whitefish Mountain. The best way to take advantage of the views is literally to wrap the edges of these sites at the buildings. And then we'll do our best also to contain and create some beauty. And the buildings are far enough away. I think even the views that are internally focused will be able to look between and beyond and above the buildings beyond them because of the distance. So it's just a different way to look at it as opposed to building, parking, building, parking, building, parking. Let's find a way to try to take advantage of the site. So moving on to the next one. I'm surprised you didn't flip ahead, PJ. That's intentionally. This is just some showing up, stepping through literally. The light green represents a certain grade, and then we start dropping down and down. You can see the dark green is area we aren't even touching with buildings because it's just too low. And so a great deal of acreage is being devoted to green space. The next one shows geotech, basically where we're been told to stay away from because of the erosion. The next one I think is just showing how we are dealing with connections and traffic. These are the ones that were mentioned earlier by PJ, where we're going to be plugging in at least 2 locations. Everything else is internal circulation. The next one is, again, showing just where can you build? Well, we can build all the way around. You can see some viewing Glacier, some viewing the bluffland, and then the ones in the middle we called urban and walkable. Those are ones where we did tighten it up to the street a little bit more, and you can almost imagine that is literally going to look and feel a little bit different than the rest of it. It's going to focus more internally in a more sort of urban walkable approach. And then everything though does connect itself. It should easily connect to the riverfront. This is interesting. This is a long time ago. We even show a little brown box down on the flats. We thought about developing down there, quickly decided it was too expensive to do, so we didn't even need it. So the next slide shows if you break these into bite-sized chunks, and the next one even into chunks where they are about looking at 3 different building types instead of 6 or 7. So the next one starts to look at what if you mass this up into 2 or 3 story structures, and then the next one I think is some basically some test fits and seeing how many units you can get there. And then we work our way into some character. And here's a view where we start to, once we kind of know what we're going to build in terms of scale, then we can go back to our images like that and start to see, and I would challenge you to look and say, do you see some of the horizontal lines, some of the vertical breaks, and even some of the color potentially we can put in the windows to represent the fall colors that are seen there, all in an effort to make these buildings look like a vertical extension of the bluff line that they're built upon. So that's what we were thinking when we did this. The next ones are just 3-dimensional views. You can flip through those. I think you already saw them, but that one we're trying to tighten it up just a little bit more. That's the one that's on the main arterial there, where we do make it a little bit tighter intentionally. I think that's about it. There's another one I think that shows the clubhouse. We're just kind of playing with the clubhouse at this point, but a much smaller scale version of the regular other buildings. So I think that's it for me. I'm going to let Ben come up and talk a little bit about the site and the engineering side of things. So any questions, though, just let us know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Ben Rankin with the WGM Group. Just wanted to talk a little bit about the 4 deviations that we have and go into a little bit more depth. I think PJ shared some of these slides earlier, but this gives a little bit more of a zoomed in view. So the first slide here just is kind of an overall layout of the whole development and what we're planning. The next zooms in a bit to the 80-foot building setback, or the 80-foot right-of-way, where we're going from a 15-foot setback to the 10-foot setback, and that allows what David was talking about, where we can have that more walkability appeal for those buildings that are fronting Rose Crossing. The next slide here is for the height deviations. It's just for those buildings that are on the western side, and that's mainly for the slopes, so some of the buildings can get built up. As the height deviation, or the height, the 45-foot, the next slide here shows that. The 45-foot height limit is exceeded on the buildings on the western side because of the garages that are going to be under the buildings for parking. On the next slide, PJ. You can see they're 12 foot under the 42 tall foot building, which extends above the 45-foot into the additional requested deviation area. The next slide shows a bit of the river setback. You can see the red line is the geotechnical setback that Slopeside provided with their analysis. And with that analysis allows for adjustment for 3-to-1 slopes within that bank. If you they're kind of hard to see, but you can see some of the contour lines where it does get steep along that the river edge there. Next slide. This also goes in a little bit more detail on the setbacks, showing the 100-foot river setback along with the geotechnical setback. And I believe the next slide shows the 200-foot setback along with the 100-foot setback and the geotechnical setback. Next slide. This was part of PJ's presentation, which shows where that we are encroaching with the buildings into that 200-foot river setback. It also shows the 100-foot river setback in addition to the geotechnical setback. And I believe this final slide here shows where we are following along the dark blue line, which would be basically the edge of that cultivated area combined with the geotechnical setback. I think the final slide is where we have the proposed setback. This doesn't show the development. The orange line is the 200-foot setback, but this is all going to kind of be similar to what has happened in phase 1, which you can see under construction on the west side, where we're going to be, I don't think you can see it on this, but in the recent Google Earth aerials, you can see where they've rehabilitated some of the disturbed area within that 100-foot setback. So happy to answer any other questions that anyone has. Otherwise, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other further public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna look to the council for a motion on ordinance 1917, the PUD.
Is it 1917?
Mr. Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move ordinance number 1917, an ordinance to amend section 27.02.010, official zoning map, City of Kalispell zoning ordinance number 1677, by creating a residential planned unit development to be known as Stillwater Bend Phase 2 PUD over certain real property, more particularly described as Parcel B of Certificate of Survey number 13982, situated in the southeast quarter of Section 24 and the northeast quarter of Section 25, Township 29 North, Range 22 West PMM, Flathead County, Montana, and a portion of Tract 3 of Certificate of Survey number 12011, and a portion of the north half of the northeast quarter lying northerly and easterly of the Stillwater River of Section 25, Township 29 North, Range 22 West PMM, Flathead County, Montana, and as more particularly described on Exhibit A in accordance with the Kalispell Growth Policy Planet 2035, and to provide an effective date.
Second.
Seconded. by Ms. Carlson.
Yes.
Any discussion? Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd like to state that I really like the design of this development. Very great job, particularly the walkability along Rose Crossing. I've been one who is always pushing for this type of design on our arterials and, well, pretty much any road. I like walkability, and I really appreciated seeing that, and I hope we see more of that in our development proposals. By the way, I'm going to comment on both the PUD and the plat, just kind of all in one. And then also, I very much appreciate the multifamily development, the density there. We need as much of that as we can get, and I appreciate seeing that in this development. But as this council knows well, I very much am opposed to the deviations in our riparian setback. And I have the same concern with the phase one of this proposal as well. The geotech report, that I consider as kind of a separate consideration. It's its own consideration. You have a setback that's related to slopes and steep slopes and instability in slopes. And then you have riparian setback that is, in my opinion, therefore to address things like wildlife travel corridors, functioning ecosystems, and water quality and that sort of thing. Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, their recommendation, their standards that they put out for development along rivers is a riparian buffer of 250 feet plus a 50-foot building setback, and that's for a vegetated buffer. Our standard's 200 feet, so it's a compromise on that. And I understand part of the justification for reduction from 200 feet to 100 feet is that there's no riparian vegetation and that it will be revegetated. But again, the standard from Fish, Wildlife, Parks is 250 feet as a vegetated buffer. If it's not vegetated, that means it's more impaired in its functioning as a riparian buffer, and therefore, in my opinion, it should be even bigger, not smaller. So you get a planting of riparian vegetation within the buffer. That's the argument for maintaining it at that 250-foot standard, or in our case, our code 200 feet, not to reduce it. I just, as much as I like the design and the density, I can't support the reduction in the buffer.
Ms. Dahlman?
Refresh my memory. Phase one was in what year? 2017? Wait, no?
No.
So the initial annexation was 2017. We just did final plat earlier this summer for phase one. I think
Okay.
it was 2020 for the preliminary plat for phase one. It's just a couple years ago.
Okay. I am going to echo similar sentiments with Ryan. I really, really liked it. I don't have an issue with the development. I think it's beautiful. And I also appreciate the density. I think it's wonderful. And I agree with you, sir. It is a beautiful piece of property. It really is. And that being said, I just feel that 200-foot deviation, I can't go along with it because I think that we should be further back from it. And I know that means that there's less space for development on there. But that's how I feel. And I'm probably going to continually feel this way about any riparian setbacks in the future. Just recently said the same thing. Especially, with the future Rose Crossing possibility of it going over that Stillwater River, that puts a lot of pressure on that area. And, this is putting a lot of pressure on that area. The possible bridge would be putting a lot of pressure on the river. And like I said before, if it comes down to it, I'm going to vote for the river. And that's just where I'm going to stay. Really great job. I really like it. I do. It has nothing to do with what you guys have proposed. I think it's beautiful, appropriate. I just wish it were 200 feet back. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Can I ask a question?
No. What do you think this is, Mark?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is probably for, I don't know if it'd be the architect or who it would be, but if that riparian buffer, if it was not, if you did meet the requirements that FWP has, or even the 200 feet, do you know how many units you'd lose at that point?
We haven't studied that enough, but if PJ can bring up a slide, I think that shows the 200 setback. You know, one of the things that we're trying to hit here, you know, we could have gone to basically almost like a concentration camp type of layout that really puts all the density up on the hillside. And what we try to do is I put myself in the shoes of somebody who would actually live there. I've rented before. And when I was in Missoula, I mean, there's places that take into account the environment. So right there, if you look at it, we're basically losing one building, two buildings, a little bit of a third building, a little bit of a fourth building, depending upon pushing back there. But then what you have to do is you have to look at the emergency egress with the ring road and going to this. So you could actually say that you could lose 4 buildings right there. Those buildings range from 40 to 50 units. So right there, we're now talking about 432 down to 300. And so it is a sizable cut. And, you know, when you look at it, it's about 33 acres, but, you know, it's a core area that we can build on. We like that because there's the open space down by the river. And when you look at the cultivated area that goes down there is, you know, the areas that we are encroaching, but then building out where that stormwater area is, because we also did buy phase 1. And, you know, what we want to do is create that connectivity between that riverfront experience. So again, I understand and I hear the, you know, the 200-foot setback, and we tried to take that into account through our whole design, but just with layout and trying to hit a certain number, this is just sort of what we're up against.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And then I guess the justification then for doing that is more density, obviously, but how do we, I guess, what would be the argument to make that less? I understand that it doesn't pencil out as well, obviously, so that's an issue for you guys as developers, but how do you justify making that go from 200 to less than that and still protect the river?
Can you rephrase the question just so I understand correctly?
I guess I'm hearing what my partners down the way are saying with, you know, having a hard time justifying the shorter distance from the river. How do you justify that you're going to be able to still protect the river? I mean, those guidelines are there for a reason. What's your justification for making them less, other than being able to put up more units?
Yeah, so one of the things that we did look at is, I believe there's a slide that shows the current cultivation and then turning it into actually a riparian area. And so that yellow area is the current cultivated area that is farmed. And so what we'd be doing is, you know, we're basically encroaching on an area, I think it's 0.52 acres. But then what you gain in consideration is a significant amount. So we're encroaching on the 200-foot setback, but one could argue that we're going to repair and bring forward more acreage that could be used for habitat for birds or wildlife. So I think it's a net positive for the city, and that's how we looked at it, that's how we justified it. Is yes, we are encroaching in these areas, but when you look at the net, is we're actually adding to the adding to the ecology or the environment by adding that area.
Okay, so that yellow area is already being farmed and cultivated and has equipment going over it and,
That is correct.
okay, thank you.
I just want to note that the Fish, Wildlife, and Park is not a regulation, it's a recommendation.
Okay.
I mean, it does matter, because there's no state regulation, river setback, or anything like that. It's a general recommendation. We did send this to Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and they didn't comment on it. You know, so every city has a different setback. Whitefish, for example, their setback is 75 feet and or the top of bank. So in this case, top of bank would be like 40 feet. Because they know that really the riparian habitat stops at top of bank. So that's why that's there. But the setback originally of 200 feet is really more based off of our experiences with slope sloughing. In addition to riparian habitat and such, but as mentioned there's no riparian habitat there. So that's where the findings are coming from. So.
And to expand on that a little bit too, even built within our regulations, even if this wasn't a PUD, and just a straight subdivision, the subdivision regulations allow for a reduction in that setback when it's based on a geotech. And as part of the PUD, as you can see with some of the cultivated area, there was a trade-off coming through phase 1 that they're looking to do here as well. And Will touched on that, where we're getting a restoration done of that bank. And so you're going to see in that 100 feet a much improved habitat area in exchange for some slight encroachments further up along the bank. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Donnelly?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick question to follow up with that. Down on this lower portion where it really comes into that one building, how high up above, are we out of the floodplain at that point?
yeah, this is all well above the floodplain
Okay.
where development's going.
That's what I figured, just wanted to check.
Well, I think where I'm at on this is a couple of things. I know that, in the past, we've had developments that have come in where there's possibly areas of that terrain where it's kind of impaired or something, where the development of the lot can go through and actually go and repair maybe some of the defects of the lot. I kind of see some of that happening here. So that's a good thing. The other thing is, as far as the bridge goes, it's part of our transportation plan. We have a transportation grid in this valley that people drive all the time. There's bridges all over this valley. It's about getting people around the valley, connectivity, and I hear what you guys are saying, and I respect you for that, but the thing is, like Ms. Dahlman, you said, you're gonna choose the river on this one, and I respect that. But where I'm at with it is I'm gonna vote to house people. I look at this piece of property and I see that what they're doing to it is going to go through and actually repair some of it, create more habitat, and I think it's a well-blended approach to dealing with that setback, that recommended setback. Mm-hmm. It's not a guideline. It's not any kind of a standard. It's just a recommendation. As we heard, is whitefish, there's different setbacks throughout the valley. So I think we do a pretty good job of going through and being protective of our water bodies. And then the other thing I just wanted to go and kind of point to, the presentation, the reason why I really wanted to do that, they brought it to the planning board and they've done it before. And the reason why I think that's important is because it's one of the things we've kind of asked, applicants of projects to go and go wild with your project and see what you can show us and everything, because it's certainly not our job to do it and we don't know how to do it. So I was happy to see that again. I'll be supporting this wholeheartedly. I think that it ties in very well with the previous phase of the PUD out towards the highway, and the multi-use component of this subdivision. It just ties together. It makes sense because you're going to have 432 units back there. And if the first part out towards the highway, you know, however it develops out, whether it may have some, you know, some retail or may have, you know, grocery store or something out there, gas station, whatever, they may be able to get most of what they need right there. That's the whole point of multi-use. So I support it wholeheartedly. I think it's a good project, so I'll be voting for it. Any other, Mr. Hunter?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to follow up on a few items. One, with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks recommendation. That recommendation, my understanding, is based on their review of the science. And I think the fact that it's a recommendation rather than a regulation has more to do with the political reception that a regulation would have in Montana than it has to do with, you know, how serious they consider the science backing of that size. But and then the other point I'll make in terms of, you know, Fish, Wildlife and Parks review, I mean, they don't have a dedicated staff that just looks at development projects all day. That's a kind of a side project that they put time toward, and my understanding is that it's kind of, they only put their attention to the most egregious stuff in the valley, and so, and that's mostly stuff outside of city limits in the valley. So the fact that they don't comment doesn't necessarily mean that it's a project that they would be all enthusiastic about, I guess, is
Are
how
you
I would put
speaking
it.
for them?
I've spoken to them about how they don't have time to review everything that comes to them with the depth that they would like, maybe. So it's speculation, maybe more based on some conversations I've had in the past with them. And again, that 250-foot recommendation from them is based on a vegetated buffer. So I very much appreciate they're going vegetate. I'm glad we're getting a revegetation rather than 100-foot without vegetation. I mean, it will be a certain improvement, and I'm very glad that that's the case. But the 250-foot recommendation, based on the science from Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, my understanding is based on a vegetated buffer. So,
Mr. Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just feel like I want to throw this out there. It's counter to kind of what everybody's talking about here, but I feel that a lot of these concerns are best addressed at the planning board level when these come out, because at this point, these gentlemen out here have done a lot of work to get to this point, and this is after they've been through the planning board process. And it may be pertinent that they would take a closer look at some of these concerns and maybe alter the plan slightly, but back when they're developing the plan instead of after the plan's already created. So we've come into these discussions quite a bit, and I would love to have this discussion at the planning board level.
We do.
I know. I'm just saying that
That's why there's findings of fact.
there
from
may
the
be some
planning
people
board.
that aren't going to the planning board and voicing these concerns there. I think that's the most appropriate place to start this discussion, so that the architect and the developer can consider them when they're planning. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but I think that maybe this discussion is really late in the plan, and it would be more pertinent at the beginning.
Yeah, if I can just talk about the process on that. You don't get a get out of jail free card.
Yeah.
I mean, the process is set up in this fashion.
Sure.
You know, otherwise, why have a planning board if we're going to have everyone from council expressing their concerns that they may have? You want that separation, but ultimately it is this body's decision.
I guess, yeah.
And a PUD is a matter of grace, not of a typical standard. So that's why it does fall in this body's
Sure.
lap for that.
No,
And
I enjoy the discussions. I learn a lot during these, but I guess I should actually also kind of relish these moments right now, because we won't be able to have very many of them in a little bit, right?
it depends on the development that comes forward and if it meets standards. But if it's a conditional use permit or excuse me, like a PUD, again, that is a matter of grace. in front of the governing body here, because they are looking at the deviation component related to it.
Sure.
Not just the typical, it meets all the standards, all the zoning, all the development. So if you're looking at deviations, yes, those will still come back before council.
Okay, appreciate it. Depending on how the new law is adjudicated, right?
And I will just point out that I did raise these concerns under phase 1 before phase 2 was ever designed. And I did hear when I first was elected that my presence at planning board would not be necessarily appropriate, so I've respected that. So trust me, you'd probably see me there if I hadn't had that instruction, so.
State law has them set up into separate bodies, and again, this is ultimately a regulatory component when you're looking at a PUD, and so you do have those separations.
Any other discussion? Any roll call?
Counselor Nunley,
Aye.
Counselor Carlson,
Aye.
Counselor Gabrielle,
Aye.
Counselor Dowd,
Aye.
Counselor Dahlman,
Nay.
Counselor Fisher,
Aye.
Counselor Hunter,
No.
and Council President Graham.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. I'm gonna ask for a motion for resolution 6175 for the preliminary plat. Mr. Dowd, you're way over there.
I know.
I'm used to sitting over
Thank you,
there.
Mr. President. I move resolution number 6175, a resolution conditionally approving the preliminary plat of Stillwater Bend Phase 2, more particularly described as parcel B of certificate of survey number 13982, situated in the southeast quarter of section 24 and the northeast quarter of section 25, township 29 north, range 22 west, PMM, Flathead County, Montana, and a portion of tract 3 of certificate of survey number 12011, and a portion of the north half of the northeast quarter lying northerly and easterly of the Stillwater River of section 25, township 29 north, range 22 west, PMM, Flathead County, Montana.
Second.
Miss Gabriel, we'll give that to you.
Okay.
Okay, any discussion on that? Ms. Gabriel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to add that my questions previously were, I have a very hard time as well with seeing all of our farmland being developed into things. However, I love this development and love what they've done with it, and just want to add that if that area, that's why I asked the question I did with the yellow, it's already being plowed and planted, and you know, who knows how much fertilizer is being dumped in the river. So I look at this as a very good stewardship type piece of property and project for that piece of property, if that makes sense. I'm mixing up words here, but I think they've done a great job making this work in the area where they designed it, and it's going to be a beautiful development. That's all.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Counselor Nunley,
Aye.
Counselor Carlson,
Aye.
Counselor Gabrielle,
Aye.
Counselor Dowd,
Aye.
Counselor Dahlman,
Nay.
Counselor Fisher,
Aye.
Counselor Hunter,
No.
Council President Graham.
Aye. That motion carries. Okay, I'm gonna close that item out and move on to our third item tonight. It's the Lofts at Buffalo Hill conditional use permit. Mr. Russell.
Hey, Mayor and Council, again, Council President and Council. I'll go ahead and turn it again over to PJ Sorensen, our Senior Planner, for the staff report.
All right. Thank you, President and Council. This is a request from Emmanuel Lutheran Communities for a conditional use permit to allow the expansion of an existing residential care facility on property located at 185 Crestline Avenue and for a building height exceeding 60 feet. The expansion, which is called the Lofts at Buffalo Hill, will include 40 new independent living senior apartment units in a 4-story addition, along with the fitness area and parking on the first level underneath the building. A conditional use permit's required due to the property's location in an H1 healthcare zone. The building's planned to be up to 68 feet tall to allow for the parking area under the structure and for improved architectural design. Under the zoning ordinance, 60 feet is allowed as a matter of right, and an unlimited height is allowed with a conditional use permit. The addition would be located in the northwest portion of the property along Claremont Street. In terms of the location, I think most people are probably familiar with Emmanuel Lutheran, right south of Logan Health. This is at the corner of the two roads coming in. Utilities are for the most part in place. There's no extensions of water necessary. Sewer would be extended down the alley to serve the addition. Based on the type of use and projected number of trips generated, a traffic impact study is not required under city rules. And it's the shot of the property where it would be going. As I mentioned, it's zoned H1. Residential care homes and facilities, as well as multifamily dwellings, are both conditionally permitted uses in this district, and rezoning the property is not necessary for this proposal. Growth policy shows it as urban residential. Growth policy in Chapter 4A on housing encourages a variety of residential development that provides housing for all sectors and income levels within the community. Additionally, infill development is encouraged to lessen impacts on sensitive lands and provides additional housing opportunities where services are available. And as I mentioned, city services are available with water and sewer and streets in the vicinity. As shown in the site layout, the lighter gray is existing. The darker gray would be the new addition that would be coming on. They would have the 40 parking spaces inside the structure and be accessed off of the alley coming in from the north. They would be creating somewhat of a courtyard. They'd have to address some building fire code exiting as part of the creation of that courtyard area. In relation to parking, under the zoning ordinance, both elderly housing, which this project does qualify for, and assisted living complexes require 1 space per 2 dwelling units, and convalescent nursing homes require 1 space per 8 beds, plus 1 space per employee on the maximum shift. The applicant submitted a parking calculation that shows a minimum requirement of 86 parking spaces, which is 16 for the existing number of beds, 50 for employees, and 20 for the new units, with 117 parking spaces provided on site, thus exceeding the minimum requirement. The parking design and number of parking spaces would be reviewed as part of the building permit and site review processes to ensure compliance with the zoning ordinance. Design standards in the zoning ordinance would apply setbacks and lot coverage standards, and the proposal as shown can meet those standards, although again, those would be verified during the building permit process. The H1 zone, as I mentioned, has a 60-foot maximum height by right and unlimited with the CUP, which was included with the application. Additional heights generally appropriate when the request is based on improved design of the project and otherwise meets code requirements. Assuring there is adequate parking on the Emmanuel Lutheran campus so that it does not spill into adjacent residential neighborhoods is critical in this situation. Given the built environment around the property, the most economical and efficient use of space is to include parking in a garage under the building, which adds to the height versus more surface parking on site. In this instance, the parking garage and pitched roof design are elements which enhance the aesthetic design and functionality of the project without unduly impacting adjoining properties beyond any impacts from the 60 feet allowed by right. We did contact Logan Health regarding the alert helipad, and they didn't anticipate any impact on their operation, and there are no city codes which would require any mitigation steps. There is an FAA advisory circular regarding obstruction marking and lighting, which does contain certain guidelines, and it's recommended that the applicant familiarize themselves with those and follow those guidelines. We did receive some written public comment at the public hearing, but no verbal comments were received at the public hearing with the Planning Board. With that, the Kalispell City Planning Board and Zoning Commission adopted staff report KCU 2305 as findings of fact and recommended that the Kalispell City Council approve the conditional use permit for both the expansion and the additional height up to 68 feet, subject to 10 stated conditions, and be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Mr. Hunter?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. PJ, could you review, I believe we have just some standard measures that protect the city if halfway through the building project, the developer goes under, the project sponsor financially has trouble to completing the project, can you review some of those safeguards we have?
Well, one thing that we do have, I guess we don't have any safeguards, and we don't review any of their financials as you're coming through. And people, that's a private matter that's on their side of things to look at. If somebody's asking for a certificate of occupancy and some things aren't completed, sometimes, for example, right now the asphalt plants are closed and they can't, finish some of the site work or do landscaping, we'll get performance improvement agreement, which would be similar to what we do with subdivisions. And they'd post a bond and a completion date within a year to finish up some of those site improvements. But we don't have any type of process, and I don't think that we really can have a process to check their financials or anything along those lines.
Yeah, and I understand we can't be looking into the financials. I guess I'm remembering with the hotel project and the parking structure that we had some measures in there that said, if something happens, there's a bond or something, and it comes in and kind of.
Well, that's a different situation because
Right.
it's city-owned property that we had an RFP out for, so we're entering into a development agreement with that. So this is private property with their project on there, the same way that we wouldn't check for a single-family house when we're issuing a building permit that they can cover their mortgage.
Yeah, that was special components we put in that development agreement as a protection, since we had that claw into the project itself in terms of our participation in it. So, yeah, outside of that, we don't have any within our standard ordinances.
In general, I guess the one thing would be there's got to be a safety component. If for some reason construction were to stop, it would need to be fenced off, and there would be a safety component that would be tied into the building permit, but that would be about it.
So I guess it'd be kind of like, well, I don't want to name, but yeah, other projects that don't move forward. Yeah, you get the fence around, then it just sits there, right? I mean, that's kind of an eyesore. We don't like it, but I guess probably after 2008, we had some of that, maybe.
Yeah, we've had a couple developments that have sat there, and some have taken off since then, that have gone through the initial process, platting, subdivision, gone through that, and then just didn't have the market for it in various stages. We've talked about some that have had what some would consider undesirable land modifications, that essentially what they do is they sit there until someone buys those out of whatever debt capacity they're in, and that really is the driver for it. And again, that's going to be dependent upon the market. But yeah, we got the public comment concerned about the financials. That's outside of our scope. And in reality, as we're talking about it and we saw it today, well, if I'm the applicant, I'm saying, well, this project will get us out of that. So that's just not the business the city's in terms of forecasting that. That's between them and their lender and where that is. But usually if you see failed projects, that means the next person in is going to make money on those projects in terms of historical developments.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? I guess maybe I would have a question, because I know it's been on public comment, but parking. As far as in public comment, it talks about possibility of I guess parking problems.
Yeah, if I may, then I'll turn it over to PJ. I think the public comment, we're using a different calculation and a different category of development. I think the staff report identified the parking, and I know we've gone over it briefly, but if you just want to hit it again from the staff report of that calculation and how it meets the requirements.
Right. So just as a general statement, every use has got a parking ratio under the zoning. The nursing home has got one where I think it's 1 per 8 beds plus 1 per employee. Senior housing projects, and so there's certain things that would qualify under federal law. Generally, 55 and older only type of communities. There's reduction that's built into the zoning ordinance where it's 1 per 2. When you apply that ratio here, I think there's 86 provided, or 86 required, 117 that would be provided on site. And so even if you increase that and had 1 per unit, which is kind of what they're doing, my understanding is, they've got 40 underneath that they're primarily going to be for the housing here. you're still underneath what the, you're still meeting what that requirement would be that we have, where they'd be providing more parking spaces than what our minimum requirements would be.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and open this up for public comment. If there's any public comment in the audience, please step forward and state your name and your address.
Hi, my name is Carla Wilton, 438 Maple Drive here in Kalispell. And I'm happy to be here this evening. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Emmanuel Lutheran Communities, and I'm representing both Emmanuel and Jason Kronk, our CEO, who is traveling home from New York right as we speak. Based on your questions, I'd like to quickly address some of the comments that were in Mr. Hanlon's letter, public comment that he sent in. He, over the last 18 months, has brought this same misguided concern to our administration and board, and has refused to sit down and have face-to-face conversations, instead continuing to use misinformation to create worry among residents and family members. It's been a very unfortunate relationship. The facts are that we have achieved bond covenants each year. We have cleared audits every year, and we've returned all refunds due to contract holders. Our audits are transparent and available to residents in our library, along with our monthly financials. As said before, the financing for this project will happen next year, and that will be explored by our board and finance committee of our board. And the bondholders that we report to quarterly are really excited about this project, and some of them hope to be a part of this future expansion. Tonight, as you know, before the council is a decision to grant a conditional use permit based on the recommendation of the planning board and the staff's due diligence. I'd like to remind us all that the aging population in the United States is growing faster than it ever has before. There are 10,000 people turning 70 every day in the United States. Montana is the 5th fastest aging state, and Flathead County is the fastest growing aging county in the state. And so we have a huge need for senior housing for all income levels. We're really excited about the positive impact this project will have on those who choose to move to the lofts, as well as the overall health of Emmanuel. I appreciate you hearing this tonight, and thank you so much for considering it, and hopefully you will approve it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening, President Graham and Council. My name is Rory Young. I'm with Jacola Engineering and Architecture. We're located at 2250 Highway 93 South. I came to tell you a story about parking, but I think PJ beat me to the punch. So if you have any other questions on any of the technical aspects related to the site, I'd be happy to come back and get you up to speed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Is this someone's here? Did everyone get my, excuse me, my name is Roe Hatlin, 40 Claremont. I'm a resident at the Villas. I must be a terribly mean guy. They would not let me speak at the annual meeting because I wasn't on the delegate or a board member. But I'm here today as a representative of the Residents Finance Committee. I have a strong Lutheran background. I have a strong financial background. I'm a local. I was actually born in the old Kalispell Hospital just a few years ago, maybe. I'm here because I oppose the granting of a conditional use permit for the expansion of 40 new independent living units. In my opinion, ILC, as I call it, is in no financial condition to take on additional financial expansion.
It has demonstrated that it can't manage its existing business profitably, let alone an expansion project that would undoubtedly have dire consequences for Emmanuel Lutheran's current residents. Now, why do I say that? How many of you are aware that Emmanuel has $74.7 million of debt? And that's on annual revenue of $24 million. $74.7 million of debt on $24 million of revenue. How many of you are aware that the current Emmanuel administration has in the last 7 years generated $15.7 million of losses, including $3.3 million of losses last year? How many of you are aware that Emmanuel Lutheran has a negative net worth of $1.8 million? How many of you are aware that for most of the last 2 years, Emmanuel Lutheran has been in technical default on its $55.7 million, 5% Kalispell, Montana housing and healthcare revenue bonds? And it has escaped at year end, when it counts, by sheer luck and by what I call creative accounting last year. I'm a CPA by background. They did get approval from their CPA firm, but I still don't understand it. Taking in September $600,000 from the foundation, moving it back to June 30 so the debt ratio wouldn't be in violation. Now, and then in the current year, they've also been in technical default on their bonds. So why the concern about bond default? Well, are you aware that when a resident invests in an independent living unit, like the villas where I live, like the cottages, and where the lofts that are being proposed, do you know what they have to do? You have to take a second equity position in your investment. And you do that to Emmanuel Lutheran, but in reality, you take a second position to the bondholders. Now, my neighbors in the villas are very concerned. Emmanuel Lutheran owns the villa and cottage residence $11.5 million, which they should be able to get back when they leave the unit or when they die. If Emmanuel Lutheran defaults on its bonds, that's going to be lost. And the bondholders are going to be in charge of Emmanuel Lutheran. In addition, when you invest in an independent unit, 25% of your investment immediately you lose because it's set up to take care of things down the road. You can get your 75% back if you leave your unit and someone else comes in and replaces you. And if that doesn't happen after 18 months, if Emmanuel Lutheran is financially solvent, you can get reimbursed by them after 18 months. Now, there is one little tricky part. They will reimburse you when you leave the premises, which we just found out about. A friend of mine, she lived in a villa. She had to move to assisted living. Someone came in, took her place. Emmanuel Lutheran got the money. She didn't get the money because she hadn't left the premises. In other words, she hadn't died. So she's paying for assisted living, and the money that replaced her villa unit, Emmanuel Lutheran has. And that's wrong, and that needs to be changed. Given Emmanuel Lutheran's dire financial condition, as has been noted, it's my contention that investing in an independent living unit is like rolling the dice in a Ponzi scheme. The last one standing meets the maker, and that's the bondholders. It is also my contention that no one in their right mind, if they fully understand Emmanuel Lutheran's dire financial condition, would ever invest in an independent unit. So then you can ask, well, Ro, you're looking at me and you invested in one. How did that happen? Well, in 2021, we sold our family camp on Flathead Lake much more quickly than we thought. We needed a place to stay. My wife had made a deposit. We had known Jason Kronk, the CEO, for some time. We considered him a friend. His son had even spent a week at Minnesota Independence College and Community, which is now in its 28th year, that was founded by my wife for young adults on the autism spectrum. We knew other members on the board, and we looked at a beautiful facility, and we thought, this is great, and we did no due diligence. Imagine our shock in November of 2021 when we paid $512,000. We subordinated our equity rights to Emmanuel Lutheran, really the bondholders, and we thought we joined a financially sound institution. We were wrong. When residents found out about my background, I'm a CPA, I've been chief financial officer of 2 large publicly owned restaurant chains before founding my own, which grew to 403 company-owned restaurants in 39 states. So they asked me to, with my background, to look into the financial realities of Emmanuel Lutheran, because when we were interviewing, no one said one word about what the financial condition is. They never said one word about when we signed our deal, Emmanuel Lutheran was in default, technical default on their bonds. And that was the case for everyone before me. Well, I looked into it, and what I determined is this. Emmanuel Lutheran ceased to be financially viable in 2000 and May of 17 when it sold $65.3 million of bonds at a time when it was losing money and only had $15 million in revenue. It then proceeded to spend $47 million on the facilities we see today, which are wonderful. The increase from the new villas and a few cottages did not begin to cover the losses. Just calculate 5% on $57.5 million, which is close to what it is today. In addition, when we were interviewing and going through the stuff, no mention was made of the fact that Emmanuel Lutheran's 5-star skilled care nursing center by 2019 had dropped from a 5 to a 1. And then in 2022, it was still at a 2. Well, that was never declared publicly. And the reason you go into one of these facilities is eventually you need to be in skilled care maybe. No one wants to go into a skilled care center with a 1 or 2-star rating. My wife is a nurse, and she speaks from practical experience. So anyway, after my financial discovery of Emmanuel's dire financial condition, I sent a letter on February 22nd to the board and to the administration, and I said, never again should any resident or any villa or cottage resident be allowed to purchase anything without receiving full financial disclosure as well as information on the status of bonds in the default. I sent that letter February 2nd, 2022. Finally, in August of 2022, 6 months later, I received a draft copy of the financial proposal. I also said that I did not believe anyone in their right mind, if they knew the financial condition of Emmanuel Lutheran, would really be willing to buy a villa. Rather, they should be building those and renting them out. So you have no equity position. You don't have to worry about default other than if the bondholders come in and take over it, you may have to move, but you haven't lost your equity. Now, this morning, when we talk about the lofts, I read where there's a waiting list to get into the lofts. So I called the person in charge of marketing and I said, Ashley, are you taking deposits for these lofts? She said, yes, we are. I said, well, how much are they? Well, some are $1,500 if you're not too serious. Others are $50,000. And there are several $50 depositors. In the last residence committee, I said, those people that make a deposit, they need to know the financial condition of Emmanuel Lutheran. If they put in $50,000, they may feel they need something. But if they could lose all their investment, I've already talked to several people that were on the list and backed out. You need to be upfront. You need to have an integrity, and you just have to do it right. And one of the reasons I'm here is I take it personally when the values, ethics, and financial management of a Lutheran institution are not up to what I consider the right standards. And I've been on many church boards. I've been on the board of Pacific Lutheran University. Our family was one of two that founded the foundation for Luther Seminary, which provides most of Lutheran pastors. That foundation now has a net worth over $120 million. So when I looked at this, and I know you're talking about ceiling heights, but I also know a lot about parking, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I guess the point is, I think you need to understand the financial condition of Emmanuel Lutheran Church. And I don't believe anything is going to change if they can't manage their current business. How can they take on more expansion? The city of Kalispell needs to maintain its integrity. It cannot allow development by Emmanuel Lutheran when it is proven over the years that it cannot manage what it has, let alone something in the future. And I'm very willing to take any questions you might have. I know I did send you a lot of financial stuff. I expect you to memorize that, but other than that, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any further public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to look to the council for a motion. Mr. Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the city of Kalispell City Council approve a request from Emmanuel Lutheran Communities for conditional use permit KCU 23-05, a conditional use permit to allow 40 new independent living units as an addition to an existing residential care facility within the H1 zoning district, as well as a building height of up to 68 feet, subject to 10 conditions of approval, located at 185 Crestline Avenue, and more particularly described as Lot 1 of Highland Park Number 3, according to the map or plat thereof on file and of record in the office of the clerk and recorder, Flathead County, Montana.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Hunter. I think, well, I was just gonna kind of jump in here real quick. I just want to make sure that as a council, we know, we heard some public comment here. It's some sensitive public comment here, which I would go through and say that that's between those parties as it pertains to what we've heard. That is nothing that we take into account when we're making a decision for a conditional use permit. We're looking at, have they followed our standards that we've put forward in our policies and stuff. So I just want to make sure that we stay on that topic that way. So with the motion, is there any discussion other than what I had said? Mr. Hunter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I am going to be supportive of this. I think as we heard in public comment, we are seeing a lot of older folks moving into our community, and we are above average on the average age. And I think this is going to become increasingly an issue in our community. It's going to be an issue nationwide, but even more so in our community, given the average age and how that's trending upwards, that we need to account for senior living. It's going to affect everything from housing, senior living, assisted living, Medicare, Medicaid rates. That's why we're addressing, our ambulance costs and stuff. It's the same issue, right? The aging society and the impacts on communities as a result of that. I think it's increasingly going to become kind of crisis level stuff. And so we need more senior living So I welcome a project like this that increases that. I have some opinions about the industry in general that I won't go into because that's not our prerogative. Noting your comment, and generally that's the issue of finances is not something we consider in terms of project submissions, the financial stability there. I will say that those are considerations for investors, for the residents, for potential residents, but they're not considerations for us in our consideration. I will also say what I heard there is maybe a lot of ideas for legislative proposals in the state legislature in terms of regulatory control potentially. That might be a more appropriate venue for some of those thoughts and concerns regarding the industry and kind of notice to potential residents and that sort of thing. So those are my thoughts.
Mr. Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. President. While I do appreciate the earnestness and detail in our public comment tonight, I do want to make sure that the public is completely aware that what we're doing here is basically approving a conditional use permit that is related to the height and the addition to the existing building. And in no way, shape, or form do you want government to be in the middle of an agreement between two private entities. This could be something that would be pertinent to approach one of those private entities about, but it's not a place for government. So I do not want to discount anything anybody said here, but I want to make sure that everybody's aware of what we're doing here. As far as the height is concerned, I'm actually in favor of this because it provides a pitched roof in our community, which maximizes the amount of space that they have in their initial concept at least. And it will be a much better design for snow, and also it makes the building look better than just a big square. So as far as the height is concerned, I'm totally in favor. So I'll be voting in favor of this recommended height increase. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. As far as the height goes, I don't have any problem with that. It makes it look better, and the thing is well, as far as height variations, those are things that we've kind of been tackling more so in conditional use permit and stuff like that in the past. So and it's to get more units and more capacity. So I'll be supporting this. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Counselor Nunley.
Aye.
Counselor Carlson.
Aye.
Counselor Gabrielle.
Aye.
Counselor Dowd.
Aye.
Counselor Dahlman.
Aye.
Counselor Fisher.
Aye.
Counselor Hunter.
Aye.
Council President Graham.
Aye. Motion carries. I'm going to close that item on tonight's meeting and move into number 4, Westview Estates Phase 6. Mr. Russell.
Hey, Mayor and Council. Again, I'll turn it over to PJ Sorensen, our senior planner, for the staff report.
All right, thank you, President Council. Our corporation submitted requests for final plat approval for both Westview Estates Phase 6 and Phase 7. It's a little bit different because we're taking separate actions for the two. Final plat was for each phase is being requested as a separate action by the developer due to how engineering designs were completed and how they were approved by DEQ. And so some of the other things we'll be doing a staff report for both phases with this. Phase 6 is the eastern portion. Phase 7 was on the western portion. Phase 6 is an R3 zoning district with a total of 19 single-family lots on just over 10 acres of land. The Phase 7 area, also an R3 with a total of 15 single-family lots on 5.6 acres, including the lot, streets, and common area. In terms of our overall location, Glacier High School is just off the page to the south. You've got Stillwater Estates, and you've got the earlier phases of Westview immediately to the south of this. City Council approved the preliminary plat with 26 conditions on June 21st, 2021. All of the conditions have been met or adequately addressed. All infrastructure has been installed and accepted or bonded for. a subdivision improvement agreement for both Phase 6 and Phase 7 in the amount of $23,150, secured by an irrevocable letter of credit, is included for the council's consideration. Additionally, cash in lieu of parkland in the amount of $54,000, covering both Phase 6 and Phase 7, was submitted by the applicant. And it's showing the plat for 6 as well as 7. And with that, staff would recommend that the council approve the final plats for Westview Estates Phase 6 and Westview Estates Phase 7, as well as the subdivision improvement agreement and cash in lieu of parkland, with separate motions for each. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? No questions. I'm gonna open up for public comment. No public comment. Look to the council for a motion.
I can take a stab at it, Mr.
All right,
President.
Mr. Dowd.
Mr. President, I move that the city council approve the final plat for Westview Estates Phase 6, as well as the subdivision improvement agreement and cash in lieu of parkland.
Second.
Seconded by Miss Gabriel. Any discussion? Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe and I'll be speaking both to Phase 6 and 7 here. When this first came before us, the preliminary plat, I did vote against it, if I recall. I was concerned, as I often am, about sprawl in the community and kind of larger lot sizes, a bit bigger than what I consider kind of urban lot sizes. I sometimes carry over my protest votes to the final plat, I believe, but I will be contented this evening on that initial vote and reference it and go ahead and support the final plat.
Thank you. Other discussion? Okay, roll call.
Counselor Nunley.
Aye.
Counselor Carlson.
Aye.
Counselor Gabrielle.
Aye.
Counselor Dowd.
Aye.
Counselor Dahlman.
Aye.
Counselor Fisher.
Aye.
Counselor Hunter.
Aye.
Council President Graham.
Aye. Okay, I'm gonna look for, our fifth item, Westview Estates Phase 7, you already did it? Okay, so, public comment, no public comment, motion, Mr. Dowd?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the city council approve the final plat for Westview Estates Phase 7.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Carlson, discussion? Roll call?
Counselor Nunley.
Aye.
Counselor Carlson.
Aye.
Counselor Gabrielle.
Aye.
Counselor Dowd.
Aye.
Counselor Dahlman.
Aye.
Counselor Fisher.
Aye.
Counselor Hunter.
Aye.
Council President Graham.
Aye. Motion carries. And our sixth item this evening is an appointment to the Architectural Review Committee. And Mayor Johnson has requested that I go through and move forward with the appointment of Nicole Peterson to the committee. Mr. Nunley?
Make a motion to accept the proposal by the mayor for Nicole.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Carlson. Any discussion? Mr. Dowd?
I just would encourage everybody in our community to look at the boards that are available and to come forward and participate in their city government.
Because it's a stepping stone?
Roger that.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor of the motion signified by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. And close tonight's portion and move into city manager, council, and mayor reports. Mr. Russell.
Yeah, Council President, just briefly, mentioned previously in relation to work on the levy for the emergency responder in our public safety arena. We're heavily involved in that process right now. We're looking at producing some of the materials and engaging council as well. But with that, we're probably not going to be looking at having any work sessions this month. so you can plan accordingly. And the only other thing I was going to bring up is, I'm sure everyone saw, County Election Administration has actually filed for relief with District Court to have a new election. I have no idea when that would be, if it goes through, or how court will even rule on that, or if they'll even have a hearing on it, or just manage it. So we're just kind of watching. When we know more, we'll try and get information out to the council. But again, as I stated last meeting, as of right now, I have 4 members that have won the election that was held, and we'll treat that accordingly as we move forward until something else does occur. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. No. Anything from the council? Mr. Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll just follow up on an earlier comment I made, and I do appreciate being appropriately slapped down by the city manager when it's called for. But I do still don't like that process, because by the time we get to this point, the architect and developer and the entity has spent a lot of money, right? And we're at like at the tail end of that. But until somebody can help me figure out a better way to do it and a recommendation, then I won't complain about that in the near future. Thank you.
Mr. Fisher, Mr. Hunter, Stallman, Nunley, Carlson. Gabriel. I think what I would say about that is, when it comes and gets in front of the council here, that's kind of the final say on it. So, when you have other council members, they are free to vote yay or nay on the project. One of the areas where we're different from a lot of communities is a lot of the stuff that applicants, let's say for developments, are able to do with our process that helps them out is that they're able to bring something forward, get it approved, and then push it back to like architectural review or something, where they go through and button things up for those, the architectural review goes and manages that end of it, so that it's not all done on that end. They put all that time and money into it, and then it gets here with the possibility of failing. So, correct?
Yeah, and I can also expand a little bit. As council is well aware, I have spoken frequently of the value of consistency, and not to mess with that consistency. However, when you're looking at a planned unit development, that is a deviation that you cannot put those standards in because you don't know what those, and that is an offering that this council has allowed for developers to engage in that process, seeking deviations from those standards of consistency that I will fully uphold and be on the defense of the developers every single time not to mess with that consistency. That planned unit development, however, just by its nature, is not built on that consistent standard, as we saw tonight with some of those deviations. And I will fully support, even if the council comes to decide that they're not going to approve that PUD, irregardless, because they are seeking that deviation through that process. So if it's our typical standards and where we're at from there, yeah, I fully 100% agree that, if we're going to change something, change it in the standards, not in the midst of the process. But when we're looking at a planned unit development, that is a matter that is a regulatory deviation from that standard. And I think it is entirely appropriate. And that may end up in, a change or something of that nature in that planned unit development. But that is entirely within the prerogative. And that is a risk that developers take by seeking those deviations. So hopefully that's a little bit better of an explanation.
I appreciate the correction, and I'm even a little bit more thankful that you said irregardless.
And I have nothing from Mayor Johnson, so with that, we're adjourned.